Part of Midlothian. Founded on coal, it's a company-owned village. The pit, the houses and nearly everything else belonged to the old Lothian Coal Company. On nationalisation, all that passed to the NCB, 1,000 miners' houses with the pit. But the village's last pit closed in July, and now the NCB no longer want the houses, and neither, it seems, does anyone else. "1:30 p.m. The end of the early shift at Bilston Glen Colliery. It's a huge modern mine, very different from the little village pits where many of these men, their fathers and grandfathers before them, used to work. But the coal industry is contracting, mining technology has changed, and village pits all over Scotland have closed down. David Begbie lives in Newton Grange, Nitton as the locals call it. Until last July, he'd spent all his working life in the village pit, the Lady Victoria. He knew everyone, and they knew him. When the pit shut, the workforce dispersed.
Like myself, I went to Bilston Glen, and there were far bigger pits than what the Lady Victoria was. But there'll never be a Lady Victoria. Never. There's some chops. It's took redundancy because they didn't want to go to another pit, either of them, because their working life has been centred in the Lady Victoria. And I can understand their feelings for it, because I wasn't really wanting to go away myself. But now I went and quite happy with it, but not as happy as I was when I was at the Lady.
Home to Newton Grange, a mining village without its pit. Now that the Lady Victoria's closed, the houses have become a liability to the coal board. So whenever a family moves out, the workmen move in and board them up.
They were in far better condition than this. And every one of them is occupied.
And what do you think of the place now?
It's in a terrible state. Part of it is anyway. Well, these houses used to be in, well, good condition. They've just been left to go to ruin.
Not all of Newton Grange has gone to ruin. The village divides into two parts, the good and the bad. These houses from 6 to 10 Street are new by Newton Grange standards. They were built in 1926, and since then many of the residents have spent a lot of money modernising them. All of these houses are occupied. The bad part runs from 1st to 5th Street and takes in the square. It dates back to the turn of the century. Some of these cottages are damp. Most have old 5-amp wiring. Some have no power points in the kitchen. It's been the board's policy to move people from here to the better houses, and then to send in the bulldozers. The local authority put a stop to that by placing them under a conservation order. Now the NCB just board them up. 78 houses so far have suffered that fate. But vandals don't read conservation notices, and empty houses don't make good neighbours. These back gardens have become a dumping ground, and as the rubbish mounts up, more and more families want out. Mrs. Pearce and her husband, a retired miner, were born and bred in Newton Grange and have lived in this house for 29 years.
It blows all over the place, especially in this wind. I mean, we get it all up here. We're always burning stuff that comes up into our garden. We just let the garden go, because what was the sense? I mean, we were getting all that rubbish from down there. There's no sense in doing anything to it.
And are you wanting to stay in Newton Grange? I mean, are you wanting to stay in this house and just get them to do something with it?
No, we're in for an exchange in the streets from 6th Street over. So
That's the better houses
oh
than your
yes,
houses.
they're nice
Oh,
houses.
they're lovely houses over there.
Really.
I can remember they
I was
being built.
brought up over there, 7th Street.
And would you think of moving out of Newton Grange to get another house?
No, really.
Oh, I could stay here. I mean, I quite like the place.
Mrs. Brown, what's this house like?
It's no bad, really. I've got some damp in the bairn's bedroom. I'm waiting on the coal board coming up to see it. And the wire and the electricity, it's terrible. Like, if I've got the washing machine on in the kettle, it blows a fuse.
And does that worry you in case the house goes on fire? Or?
Well, they just tell me that there's too much power in a washing machine when it's heating water and in a kettle. So I've just put the washing machine off when I'm boiling the kettle. Simple as that.
And what about other houses? Do they have the same kind of problems?
Well, with the floods and that, there has been enough a lot of damage with the houses. Like, so my brother's, he had a flood. And they were told not to use their electricity, and they ended up putting it on. When they came up and says it was okay, next again day his house went on fire. He had to get rehoused.
So what happened to the house next door?
Well, at Christmas, it was a week before Christmas, and it just, I just got out of hospital and got a knock on the door saying phone the fire brigade that the house is on fire. So I didn't see it until the next again day about what a mess it was in. And it was an electrical fault.
How is your wiring?
Very bad. I mean, I'm going through about 3 light bulbs a week because they keep blowing all the time. And my electric fire keeps fusing the whole lights, and it's not my fire that's at fault. But I think, well, I've had them up to have a look at them, and they say they're okay, but I don't think so.
Now, the gardens next door are a bit of a mess with the 3 houses being bricked up. Does it worry you, people coming into these gardens?
Yes, because, well, all the rubbish comes down here, and there's been rats seen. I mean, my husband saw rats, and I've saw them.
What about the children?
Well, I wouldn't have them outside to play. I wouldn't have my wee boy out to play in case he got bitten with a rat. And I couldn't put him out in the pram in case he got bitten. I just wouldn't do it. So it really frightens me. And even although I've got the garden at the front, I wouldn't let them out to play.
The Burnetts know all about these problems. They hold the keys to no less than 3 NCB houses. House number 1. 13 The Square. Did you like living here, Louise?
Yes, we did. Well, there's a nice view for here,
It's lovely.
Well, and it was handy for the wee girl, with her being disabled and that. The park was there for her, and she could play in it well. Now she's nowhere to play.
And why did you move out?
Through the floods. We got flooded on Saturday morning.
And how bad was it?
Terrible. It came down through the living room ceiling, and all the furniture and carpets and that was all saturated with water.
Before the flood, this was home to Mr. Burnett, a retired miner, his wife and their family for 26 years. But now it's no longer habitable.
This is the bedroom. They had to put a new ceiling in. It was just after the floods.
What the water was pouring in. And what's this?
That's dry rot. I went there, lift the carpets again, put a shifty stuff out, and my foot went right through it.
And what about the other rooms? Are they as bad?
Yes,
Well, the living room had got it too. They had to put a new ceiling here. All the water was coming down through the ceiling. And we had to put the lights off, and we got saturated with water. It all just came down, you know.
But they were repairing it in the hope that you'd come back in?
Yes.
And so then, what happened? I mean, why didn't you come back?
What we were saying, they says that there were a lot of houses in Newton Grange like this, and we weren't the only one. And we explained it to them that Marion was a wee cripple, and we needed a place to go to. And they just asked us to go back up here and live because we had the bedroom. That was before we lifted the furniture and that.
But when did they decide that you couldn't come back in here?
Well, they came to repair. After I'd finished with the living room, they came to sort this ceiling here,
So they'd already put in 2 ceilings and they
Yes,
came in here.
and they came to repair this ceiling, and they seen that the wood was all dry rot going right through. And they put one beam across, again on that beam there. And they said it was a temporary repair now. And we went back down and approached them to see when they were coming, because it had lain empty for 2 days without any workmen coming. And they told us
What, it was too
it was
costly?
going to cost too much, yes. It was going to cost about £600 to sort of seal. £200 for the room floorboards, and the NCB couldn't afford that.
House number 2 for the Burnett's is number 7 2nd Street. It was originally supposed to be only temporary accommodation, but it began to look as if it might become their permanent home. 3 rooms for 6 people, and one of them a handicapped child.
We went in and we seen a Dr. Dunhill, and she says, I heard you were having problems with your house, Mrs. Burnett. I said, yes. She says, what about bath and marrow? I said, well, we've only got cold water in number 7 2nd Street.
There was no hot water?
No.
The doctor wasn't at all happy about their daughter living in these conditions, so Marion was put into care for a week. The Burnetts went back to the National Coal Board and were offered house number 3, 24 the Main Street. It too had been flooded, but the Coal Board lent the family heaters to dry it out. They've been decorating every day for the past 6 weeks and hope to move in a fortnight.
There was a lot of fungus on the wall and dampness. We had to scrape everything from the top to the bottom. We're getting on not too bad. It's 2 or 3 repairs needing done yet.
A new home, but not much of a fresh start. The wallpaper is no sooner up than the dampness comes through again. Back at their original house, the boards go up. It's been a costly closure for the NCB. 2 new ceilings and a partial rewiring in December. It's cost the Burnetts a pretty penny too.
Roughly about £500 up to now. Buying new kitchen units, new carpets and wallpaper, paint, and time for to pay somebody to do it. Then there's the removals after that, again, flattening down.
And you've been doing all the work yourself?
Yeah.
Are you happy going to Main Street with Marion?
No, I was really staying number 13. Because
Yeah.
because she had the big park to play in where the Main Street's too dangerous for buses and that. So we'll just have to try and keep her out the backs, you know, or get somebody to take her to the pool and across the road to the trampolines and that. But otherwise I would have preferred 13.
A lot of people would like to stay where they are, but not the Coal Board. They own the houses, but the land belongs to Lothian Estates. The lease expired in 1980, and since then it's only been renewed on an annual basis. The Coal Board wants out soon.
The board's policy is to dispose of their housing stock. In 1947, at nationalisation, the board took over 24,000 houses. Many of these houses, such as some of them in Newton Grange, were date back to the turn of the century. And in the intervening 35 years, we've demolished and sold a large number of houses, so that at the present time the housing stock is down to 3,800. Now, out of that 3,800, only a quarter of them are occupied by active mine workers.
Haven't you ensured that the village will die by boarding up houses as they become vacant and not reletting them?
The position simply is this, that the board only let to mine workers. The board are not in housing as a housing organisation or housing authority. That is the district council's responsibility as a statutory housing authority. And the board only let to mine workers. When the demand for mine workers no longer exists, then we've no alternative but to close the houses. We're quite happy to transfer them to the local authority for general housing needs if they so desire.
What kind of price would you ask of the local authority?
As far as the Newton Grange houses are concerned, they'd be transferred free of charge. We would require no compensation at all, and it would be up, of course, to the District Council to acquire the land from Lothian Estates.
Well, that sounds like an offer that's too good to refuse. So why doesn't Midlothian District Council, which after all is the housing authority, take over at Newton Grange?
Quite simple. It's a lack of finance. If we were able to bring the situation into a financial viable position, we could quite easily take over these houses and bring them up to a proper standard.
But does the fact that you lack finance absolve you of your obligations, your statutory obligations?
In this particular situation, I would say yes. I think the NCB have more of an obligation than the district authority here. I feel that they have pushed aside their obligation over a number of years.
But the NCB say they're willing to give you the houses for nothing at all. Surely if you took them on that basis, you would be able to get some grants from central government to bring them up to some kind of standard.
Well, we have gone to central government to see what grants were available, and we were denied that from central government, simply because they will not make that area a action area, a housing action area, as it's termed.
Even though many of them have rising damp, very, very poor wiring.
Yes, that's correct. We know the condition of the houses up there. In fact, there's 75 at the present time boarded up. But nevertheless, the requirement is over 50%, and they're not the required 50% to qualify for these grants.
We've heard all these reasons or excuses, call it what you want, over the years now, and quite frankly we're sick and tired of listening to excuses. They may sound all very plausible, but at the end of the day, as far as we are concerned as a community council and as a community, we regard it as buck passing.
Whose responsibility do you think Newton Grange is?
Well, I think primarily it must be the coal board, because after nationalisation in the 40s, they took responsibility not only for the extraction of coal, in my opinion, but also for the upkeep of the houses, the maintenance, and also the future of the community in general. And I think from that point of view, it's fairly obvious that they've fallen down in that capacity.
But the coal board sees itself as a producer of coal. It's been trying to get rid of its housing function for years. However, it only publicly declared that it wanted out of Newton Grange when the pit closed. So is it the policy of a nationalised industry to abandon its housing responsibilities when miners become surplus to its requirements?
No, the board's policy is to, as I say, is to dispose of their housing stock. But at the same time, they took over houses and they will remain responsible for them until they can make other arrangements. I think one thing should be made abundantly clear, and it is this, that irrespective of who owns the houses, the tenants themselves have security of tenure. They're protected under the rent tax, and there is no cause or need for them to worry about their future relationship with any landlord, whoever that may be.
But surely you have some kind of obligation to retired miners who have spent all their years in the pit and now, when they're older, are living in houses that are perhaps falling about them in some cases.
Well, we obviously have to maintain our houses. I think you've got to distinguish between maintaining the houses in a structurally habitable condition and carrying out improvements such as the local authority do nowadays, renewing bathrooms, renewing kitchens and that type of thing, which we do in the houses which we own on freehold ground. But obviously no landlord and certainly no nationalised industry could justify spending public money on house property which is reverting to another owner in a year or two's time.
It looks as if the story has come full circle. That other owner is Lothian Estates, the same family which once owned Newton Grange as part of the old Lothian Coal Company. It's a far cry from the miners' rows of Newton Grange to the borders town of Jedburgh, where the Lothian Estates are centred. Most of their land is agricultural, and by the terms of their contract with the NCB, that's what the land on which Newton Grange was built should be returned to when the lease ends. Green fields, or the NCB has to pay compensation.
The negotiations are in progress at the present time. We would aim now, I think, that the date of the termination of the lease would probably be a year in May, that is in Whitsunday 1983.
Is the question of compensation to Lothian Estates because you are not able to return this site to them as a greenfield site, causing some hiccups in the negotiations?
Not really, because the lease states quite clearly the terms on which the compensation is assessed, and no, that's not a problem.
So what would Lothian Estates do with the miners' cottages in Newton Grange? Leave them as they are? Renovate them? Sell them? Or perhaps pass them over to the District Council? We asked Mr Bridges the Factor for an interview with either him or Lord Lothian about the future of the village. He refused. A lease agreement, he said, is a private matter between the landlord and his tenant, which he isn't prepared to discuss, especially since the NCB hasn't entered into any negotiations with them about terminating their lease on the land in Newton Grange. Lothian Estates say that, in fact, there have been no negotiations with the Coal Board on the termination of the lease.
Well, that is something I just cannot understand. I received a letter from them today pursuing the correspondence that I've had with them previously on the question of the compensation which we have to pay on termination of the lease, and also on the question of the transfer of the ground.
Are you saying that there's no question that these negotiations have been going on?
There's no question at all.
With that degree of confusion between the negotiating parties, it's not surprising that the villagers feel uncertain about their future. Newton Grange is the largest mining community in Scotland. The miners want to preserve it, but they're not getting much support. Even the National Union of Mine Workers seems to think its responsibilities stop at the pit gates. They've told the Community Council that housing isn't their concern.
Of course it's worth preserving. I mean, it wouldn't be the same without Newton Grange.
Two sections of a competition and that other band only one in and still lose the competition.
Miners has always been a close-knit community. Always has in all mining villages all over Scotland. And I think that the majority of miners would prefer to see Newton Grange as it was.
That's a sentiment that would be endorsed by all miners, especially older ones like Archie Wilson. He's now 82 and has lived in the same house for 56 years.
I've spent my life here. This has been my life in Newton Grange, as a miner and otherwise. And to see the village now deteriorating as it is, it makes me very sad. In fact, you'll get that sadness throughout the village, because a lot of people saying now that the village is dead. There's no life in the village. You never hear the feet of the miners going or coming back from the work now, you know. You never hear the sound of the horns blowing early morning or break time or in the afternoon. You never hear the like of that now. You never hear the sound of the winding engine, and the closing of the pit has silenced the village greatly. The only patter of feet we hear is the youngsters going to the school and coming back from the school morning and afternoon.
A new generation is growing up here, but whether there'll be anything for them to stay for in the future, and whether they'll want to stay, is another question.
Your dad a miner? Yes. How would you feel like going down the mines? You not fancy going down the mines? Why not?
care.
Well, you must have an idea. I mean, if you don't like going down the mines, is it because it's too hard work for you?
No, too dangerous.
Oh, it's too dangerous, I see. What kind of things do you think would be dangerous down the mines?
Gas explosions.
Gas explosions, yes, that would be quite a dangerous thing later on.
I, for one, want to bring up my bairns in Newton Grange and just want them to stay. I didn't fancy going away to a big town where I didn't ken anybody and bring up the kids. Here, everybody kens them. Like say, the older folk knew me when I was wee, their bairns know my bairns, and it'll keep going on like that if Newton Grange just keeps going. If somebody does something to preserve Newton Grange, it could be just like what it was years ago, a nice wee community.
Despite all the evidence of bureaucratic buck passing, Mrs. Brown believes that someone somewhere will save the village. After all, it's only common sense.
Well, they can't leave 1,000 houses. Where would they put other people? They couldn't rehouse us. They can't give them that's looking for houses and now they can't give them in. And there's about 70 or 80 boarded up. And I'm quite sure that there is enough of little couples that would take into their houses, even the state, kind of if they were done up a wee bit. It's better than living with in-laws and rooms and all the rest of it.
So who do you think will take over?
I honestly haven't got a clue. I just don't know.
But one thing the people here are certain about is that they want to preserve the village. The Community Council sent a questionnaire to every householder here. The overwhelming majority aren't prepared to move out of Newton Grange, but would pay higher rents if their houses were renovated. And they want a decision taken about their village, not sometime in the future, but now, before it's too late. But are the houses themselves worth saving? Well, ask anyone here that question, and he'll point you just a few miles down the road to Rosewell, another mining village. These cottages at Rosewell were very similar to those at Newton Grange, but the circumstances were very different. The Coal Board owned the houses and the land, so there were no problems in selling them to the local authority, and it was quite happy to take them. Only 138 houses compared to 1,000 at Newton Grange, and they got government grants, because in all of them the bathrooms led directly off the kitchens. To modernise the Newton Grange houses to this standard would cost £11 million, and there'd be no government help, because less than half the houses are below the so-called tolerable standard. But money will be spent on Newton Grange, not on the people, but on their history. The Lady Victoria pit will be put to work again, taking tourists underground. A few cottages will become a museum.
It seems strange to us that the Lothian Estates and the Coal Board have managed to get together to set this mining museum up. And we feel that if they can do this for 4 houses, why can't they do it for the whole community? It doesn't make any sense to us that they are intending to have a museum, which they hope, along with the Pit Museum, to attract thousands of people a year. It doesn't make any sense to us that the community will be allowed to die, and it seems a travesty, in fact, to have a museum with all the machinery in the pit working, looked after, cleaned on a regular basis, and then to have people coming here and find no community, no houses, and in fact the people who worked the machines have all gone by that time.
A year from now, what do you think will have happened to Newton Grange?
I don't think it'll exist, really. I mean, it's what's needing exactly. I don't think it would exist in a year's time. And I'm not going to wait and find out what's happened. I'm hoping to get another house. And that's it.
A year or so from now, the houses will have reverted to Lothian Estates if the lease is in fact terminated.
That's the legal position.
That will be the legal position. They will revert, yes, to the landlords.
It's a chicken and egg situation. We don't have the finance. No way can we take over an obligation like that without a financial backing. And we've asked government and EEC and everybody else to come in and give us a hand. They won't do that.
A year from now, I have a sneaky suspicion that things will not have moved all that fast. As far as I can see, the Coal Board and the estates have not managed to get together in any meaningful sense. And quite frankly, I don't hold out much hope in the next year.
There's one thing for sure, they're not going to rehouse us all, not going to put us out, because here's one will definitely no shift. I came back for Germany because I wanted to stay in knitting. I was brought up here, I want to bring my bairns up here. So that's it, I'm staying in knitting. And I've been to, there's another 1,000 folk like me feels the same way.